Imagine a nation right at a crossroads, you know, facing this really deep political change after some incredibly tough years. It kind of makes you stop and think, what does it actually take to reset a country's democracy? To find a more hopeful path forward?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're focusing on Bangladesh and its recent political transition. Our main source here is an article from South Asia Perspectives by Mushfiqul Fazal and Suri. We've also got some related headlines from the same place to add context.
Okay.
So our mission really is to unpack the details of this shift as it's reported, understand the context the sources give us, and figure out what kind of future they're aspiring to. We're aiming to just convey the key ideas and the claims from these sources directly to you.
Right. So to get where Bangladesh is now, the article says we need to look back at what it calls years of a profound political trial, almost like the country's been through fire. It paints a pretty stark picture, doesn't it? Talking about democratic decay under the former prime minister, Sheikh Hasina.
It really does. The article lays out some serious allegations against her government. Things like clinging to power through suppression, electoral manipulation, and brutal crackdowns.
Okay.
And what really stands out is the mention of a recent UN human rights report. According to the source, this report implicated her regime in serious crimes against humanity.
Wow.
Yeah, including things like extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances, and even systemic torture of opponents and activists. The piece really emphasizes the human cost, the loss of innocent lives, peaceful demonstrators, activists, journalists, ordinary people being targeted. Essentially, it portrays a system where, allegedly, power was held through pretty widespread human rights abuses,
Yeah.
creating this climate of fear.
And then the source talks about this dramatic moment, the July uprising. It describes something quite powerful. These brave, young student protesters, many just starting out in life, hitting the streets, apparently with just their voices, their hopes. But the source says they were met with bullets, batons, and brutality. The article pays a really deep tribute to them, calling them the moral compass of our time. It underlines the huge sacrifice and that powerful desire for change that just boiled over.
But even amidst that difficult history, the article points to a shift, a kind of turning point. It talks about hope, a hope rooted in moral leadership and democratic renewal. So it's marking a change in the narrative, moving away from that described decay.
And that hope seems to center around one person in particular, Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus. He's known everywhere for microfinance, of course. The source presents him as this globally respected figure who's now leading the interim government as its chief advisor. That's quite a change at the top, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And the interim government's main goal, according to the article, is basically to bring the country back on track.
Yeah.
Things like restoring constitutional order, inclusive governance, and crucially, voting rights for every citizen.
That sounds like a massive undertaking.
Oh, it's incredibly ambitious. It suggests a complete overhaul, not just tweaking policies, but changing the fundamentals of how the country is run and how people participate. It's really about rebuilding trust from the ground up.
And they seem to be acting quickly. The article mentions bold and unprecedented moves, like setting up 11 independent commissions. 11. That sounds like they're trying to tackle things on many fronts at once. What's the thinking there, according to the source?
Exactly. The article frames it as more than just legal stuff. It's about reestablishing trust, fundamentally. It explains these commissions have really specific jobs, ensuring accountability, reforming corrupt institutions, and building a foundation for a transparent democratic framework. Right now, they're apparently doing things like investigating crimes, recovering assets said to be looted by the previous administration and its allies, and making sure those responsible face justice in, importantly, fair and independent courts. The implication is that by digging into everything alleged corruption, human rights issues, they're laying the groundwork for a genuinely transparent system. It's quite a comprehensive approach for a post-crisis situation.
So these commissions are looking back, dealing with accountability. But what about looking forward? How is the interim government trying to bring the country together, according to the source? It mentions national reconciliation efforts.
That's right. The article highlights a meeting described as significant and productive that took place in London. This involved the chief advisor, Dr. Yunus, and Tariq Rahman, who leads the BNP.
The Bangladesh Nationalist Party.
Yes, the largest political party. And this conversation is actually described as a turning point. That suggests it's a really critical step towards trying to bridge some deep political divides and maybe foster a more inclusive environment before future elections.
And speaking of elections, the article says the interim government has laid out an electoral roadmap. The goal is transparent and internationally monitored national elections by February 2026. So it's not just fixing the past, but charting a clear course ahead.
Absolutely. And it's presented as more than just setting a date. The article frames it as a commitment to the people that never again will their votes be stolen or their voices silenced. So the significance isn't just holding elections, but making sure they're seen as fair and free. That's crucial for legitimacy, especially after the period of alleged manipulation.
This really sounds like a fundamental shift in the country's direction. And the article connects it all back to basic principles, saying Bangladesh's future has to be built on truth, transparency, and participation, not on, fear, lies, or repression.
Yeah, and what's interesting is how strongly the article puts it. It declares that having a neutral, credible interim government is no longer just a political option, it is a moral imperative.
Yeah.
That really elevates the whole thing, doesn't it? It frames this political change as an ethical necessity, the only just way forward for the people.
The article also makes this powerful appeal to the diaspora community. It describes them poetically as carrying the soul of Bangladesh across oceans. And then it delivers this really blunt message. Silence is not neutral. Silence is complicity. It's really stressing their role, their responsibility in this moment.
And that call extends to international allies, too. It stresses the fight is existential, that Bangladesh stands at the brink.
Yeah.
And then the article offers this profound take on democracy itself. It says, it is not just a system, it is a promise. A promise that power belongs to the people, that accountability counts, that nobody, no matter how powerful, is above justice. It's quite a statement, moving beyond just politics into governance and rights.
We've definitely covered a lot based on this main article. But to really grasp the perspective, maybe tell us a bit more about the author and the publication context. The article's by Mushfiqul Fazal Ansari.
Right. The source gives us some useful background on him. Ansari is currently Bangladesh's ambassador to Mexico, and importantly, he was appointed by Professor Yunus, the chief advisor of this interim government. So he has a direct sort of inside view.
Okay, that's relevant context.
Before this, he was known as a journalist based in Washington, D.C., often asking tough questions about Bangladesh at places like the UN and the U.S. State Department. He also founded a nonprofit called Right to Freedom, R2F, focused on human rights and press freedom. So you could say he brings both a journalistic background and an activist perspective to his writing.
And it's worth noting the article itself is actually an excerpt from a speech he gave recently in Baltimore. And just to give you a bit more flavor of the context, other headlines in South Asia perspectives around the same time included things like former U.S. diplomats, Palam, Danilovich call on a chief advisor, and an elevator speech for Bangladesh's interim government by John Danilovich. So these suggest the kind of diplomatic and international attention this interim government is engaging with. Well, that was quite a journey through this deep dive. We went from exploring a period described as one of democratic decline and serious political trials to this account of a really dramatic shift, a determined push for renewal, for accountability, and for restoring fundamental rights in Bangladesh, all according to our sources.
Absolutely. And I guess it leaves you, the listener, with a pretty significant question to ponder. Considering the really profound challenges that the source details and this ambitious roadmap for change laid out by the interim government, how can those core principles, truth, transparency, participation, how can they genuinely take root in Bangladesh? And maybe think about the roles played by both, the strength of internal commitment within the country and perhaps the vigilance of international observation in actually achieving that aspiration of a Bangladesh worthy of its founding vision.